Hello and welcome back to another episode of Activist. I'm Gareth.
And I'm Jackie, and today we have the pleasure of bringing you the wonderful Katrina Fox. Now I have to admit, if I could aspire to be any activist, it would have to be somebody like Katrina. She is bright, she's breezy, she's glittery and glamorous, and she is a wonderful wealth of knowledge which she uses to help so many people.
Katrina is the founder of Vegan Business Media. She's an author, an entrepreneur, and wonderful podcast host. She's got so much information, so much brilliant advice in this episode. We really hope you enjoy it.
Katrina, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, speaking from Australia. For all our viewers around the world, could you please tell us a little about who you are and what you do?
Yes, certainly. It's a pleasure to be here with you, not so far across the ocean. So, thank you for having me. Very briefly, my name is Katrina Fox. My background is professional background is journalism. I've been a journalist for nearly 20 years. I've been involved in various types of activism, including feminism, LGBTIQ issues, and of course, animal rights, which I'm incredibly passionate about. So my journey to veganism definitely comes through animal rights activism, which I've been involved with since the mid-80s, actually, in the UK, where I'm originally from, in London. And then I've been in Sydney since 2001, and I've been involved in various types of activism throughout the years, from direct activism, protesting, through to writing in my journalism career, and more recently, in the past few years, helping vegan business owners and entrepreneurs.
Oh, that's wonderful. So on the show, we've had creative arts activists, hospitality activists, outreach activists, all sorts. Would you sort of say you're more a business activist now?
I guess potentially. I mean, I certainly think that anyone running a vegan business, that is a form of activism, and I've said that quite a lot. So I guess that particular area is really kind of helping vegan business owners and entrepreneurs to raise the profile of their brands. So that's kind of where the majority of my activism is focused. I'm also just launching a new initiative called the Vegan Women's Leadership Network, which is to help and empower vegan women to become leaders in their field, whatever that is. So they could be in business, they could be working as an employee, they could be working for NGOs. It's kind of helping empower people, helping other vegans, I guess, whether they're in business or doing other things, to be known, so that people can get to know more about veganism as a lifestyle and as a philosophy. So that's kind of where my activism is focused at the moment, and speaking at veg fests and other events as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I love, everything that you do is just so positive, and I can't wait to talk more about, all the various projects that you've been involved in. But I mean, like me, you were vegetarian for a long time before going vegan. I also grew up in the UK and, grew up on the crispy pancakes and those kind of things, Linda McCartney burgers.
Yes.
So, my mum was dead against it at the time. So, I sort of, my vegetarian diet wasn't the best back then. But, would you mind, I love your story of how you went vegan, and, would you be able to share the story of how a sandwich unexpectedly caused you to make the switch of all things?
Yeah, sure. I mean, see, I went vegetarian without actually knowing what it was at the age of 11. So I was actually very young, and this was a long time ago. And it was, I grew up in a working class council flat in an area just outside of South London called Dartford, which is famous only for its tunnel and nothing else. I kind of ate the same kinds of things. Like, my parents, were not happy about it. And I would have things like cheesy pancakes, a lot of the processed foods and what have you. In terms of my journey to veganism, that came a lot later, in the mid-90s, around about 1996. And I was on an animal rights demonstration, actually. I was going up on a coach from London to a big protest. It was a national protest. There were coaches coming in from all over the country against a farm that bred kittens for vivisection. So it got a lot of publicity. There was an adverts for it in the Big Issue and everything. So it was really big. So I went up and I was on this coach on the way to this demonstration. I was sitting next to a lovely school teacher called Kay, and I pulled out, after the journey, I pulled out, a sandwich. I said to her, would you like a sandwich? I said, it's a Marmite and cheese sandwich. And Marmite, for anyone international listeners, it's kind of like a yeast spread. In Australia, it's the equivalent is Vegemite, and I'm not sure what the American or other equivalents are, but basically it's a savoury spread and cheese sandwich. And she said, oh no, I'm vegan. I said, well, what's that? I said, look, the cheese does not have any animal rennet in it. It's vegetarian cheese. And then she explained to me what a vegan was and how the dairy, all the stuff that happened in the dairy industry, that it's not all happy cows willingly giving their milk, that it was actually a terribly cruel industry in which female cows have their reproductive systems hijacked, their babies stolen. And my jaw I was absolutely horrified. And she explained, what vegan was and what vegan meant. So of course I put that sandwich back. Luckily for me, I had a spare set of sandwiches, hummus and tomato. So they were fine. They were automatically vegan. So I didn't eat the Marmite and cheese sandwiches. And as soon as I got home, I remember this was pre-internet, I sent off for my animal-free shopper guide from the UK Vegan Society. So it's this little booklet that they sent you through the post. And it basically listed all these products that you would never think of that had some kind of animal product in, like matches, for example. And again, my jaw dropped and I felt really guilty. I thought, why did I not know this? Because I'd been vegetarian for a long time. And I remember feeling really quite pleased with myself, talking about, not eating animals, etc., not eating meat whilst wearing my leather boots. And I was just horrified to thought and I was outside, I was doing animal rights demos in the late 80s. How I missed the vegan memo back then, I don't know. I was outside fast food chains and vivisection labs at that time, and somehow an anti-fur chemical, all of that in the late 80s. But I don't know, somehow the vegan memo didn't get to me. So I did feel a bit guilty. I was like, how did I not know this? I pretty much went vegan straight away. I mean, obviously, I had to, replace things like the shoes, etc., a little bit slower, but I did it as pretty much as fast as I could. And certainly food-wise, I remember saying to my partner, Tracy, because I was responsible for doing the shopping, I said, I'm vegan. This is why I'm not eating cheese anymore. If you want cheese, you'll have to get your own. I remember her saying, oh my gosh, because, she loved cheese. We both loved cheese. She had a house in the south of France. So, we'd go to France, have all these lovely cheese and everything. When we trying to find vegetarian cheese in France at that time was hard, let alone vegan cheese. And the vegan cheeses in the UK at that time tasted like rubber. So, it was pretty, it was a bit stressful. And it took me, at that time, it took me about 3 times as long to do the shopping, because I would be there with my little booklet looking, because I was eating a lot of processed foods, checking all the packets. But once I got into a routine and I figured out, which products I knew were vegan, very quickly, that sorted itself out. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting journey. And I'm forever grateful to Kay, lovely school teacher, for for explaining to me what veganism was, and for doing it in such a lovely way, because I was on an animal rights demo. She could, and I pulled out a sandwich, with dairy in it. She could have reacted badly and said, how dare you, pulling out this oppressive sandwich. You know what I mean? But she didn't do any of that. She just explained really calmly and politely. And I noticed she did that when on the anti-vivisection demo, she would always, chat with members of the public in a really nice, gentle, positive, educational way. So yeah, I'm forever grateful to her for bringing me into veganism, which is one of the best things I've ever done.
I think it's so wonderful. I just love hearing the stories like that, where just a simple conversation has just opened someone's mind and eyes up so big. It's just it's so wonderful. And the whole approach that she took of being, sort of that non-judgmental thing, not grabbing you by the ear and dragging you off the bus,
Exactly.
And, just being so open and, very positive about it. Do you feel that's a very important mannerism to go forward with? Because it obviously worked for you, having that non-judgmental, non-pushy sort of thing. And do you believe it's something important that we should be approaching more people with, that just openness?
I do, yes, and I try to remember that, and I don't always remember, but I try to remember that myself, because most of us weren't born vegan. Now, fortunately, there are now young people who have been literally vegan from birth, which is wonderful. But for people of my generation and, a couple, before that and certainly after that, we weren't born vegan. We didn't know. And I think, back to even when I was vegetarian, I thought, I'm really, I'm so ethical. I'm not eating any meat. My cheese is vegetarian. I'm really, cool kind of thing. But I was wearing leather and I was justifying that. Like, oh, well, it's not part of the, it's not a separate industry, it's a byproduct, it would go to waste. And you justify things. And so I think we've got to try and remember that we were all at a place where we didn't know. I know it can get frustrating when we then educate people and then they still don't decide to immediately stop consuming animal products, and I know I can get frustrated around that, but I do think that more people respond to the carrot than the stick, and you never know when someone will make a change. Even the most person who you would most unlikely person, like people who are former hunters or former rodeo people, or Howard Lyman, former dairy farmers, who have that wake-up call. And I think the more open you can be to people, so that if they are curious, they're more likely to come to you and ask a question if they know that you're friendly and open, rather than if they know that you're going to rant at them because they haven't yet gone vegan. So I do think that approach is a good one. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't put posts up that are showing people what's going on, and that can be quite forthright occasionally. But I think if for example, your social media or your interactions are constantly just kind of angry and ranting, I don't think that necessarily. I think a lot of people will switch off to that, whereas if they know that you're more friendly and approachable, then I think that can be good. And also, you're showing off how fabulous veganism can be. I love my glitter and sparkle and bling, and so I will often wear that and glam up a bit, because I want people to see that vegans come in all shapes and sizes from all walks of life, and it's just about kind of demystifying it, and just be approachable, so that people can go, oh, okay, I'd like to know a bit more about that, tell me more. And I think they're more likely to do that if you're friendly, quite a friendly and positive kind of person.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're cookbook authors, vegan cookbook authors over here, and we found, through our sharing our own journey ourselves and always being positive, and look at our food, look at what we're making. We've sold so many cookbooks to non-vegans because they're really interested in our food. That looks great. What is it? I want to try it out. Not being this thing that, oh no, only certain people can do. So I couldn't agree more. I love how so many interviews that we've heard you speak in, you could kind of casually drop the line about being taken in by the dairy industry. When sharing your story, like you say, the happy cow is a facade of it all. And the huge majority of people that we've spoken to, like you and like me, have gone vegetarian first and stayed that way for quite a long time before going vegan. Looking back on it with the expertise that you have now, what are some of the marketing tricks that you feel, keep people like us at bay for so long, rather than being curious and sort of questioning?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's a mix of, like you said, the marketing tactics of the billion-dollar meat and dairy and animal exploitation industries, and also a certain amount, I think, of cognitive dissonance on our part, and I mean as humans, because we kind of don't necessarily want to work too hard. Like, we want convenience, we like convenience, and sometimes we can almost be happy staying in the dark. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily true of everybody, and I think certainly in terms of the dairy industry, I mean, that was a real shock for me, and certainly I know if I'd have known the truth about the dairy industry at a much younger age, I would have stopped dairy as well. And I think particularly for me, being involved in the feminism movement, the dairy industry in particular, I feel even probably more strongly about, because the dairy cows end up being killed anyway after they've finished with their usefulness for the dairy industry. But for me as a feminist, it was shocking to hear that. And I think it's literally those clever campaigns. They can afford to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on television advertising, which particularly back in the day was the main way that people got their information. And, they would mislead people with, happy cows in fields, willingly giving their milk away. None of this, babies stolen, forced insemination, etc. So, and I think, advertisers have done that for so long. It was funny, I was talking to my partner Tracy yesterday because she was making me a hot chocolate, obviously a vegan one, and she suddenly started singing hot chocolate, drinking chocolate. And I said, where does that come from? We both went, oh, Cadbury, and it's like they get you when you're younger, these little jingles like beans means high, all of these little things, that I'm 54 now, and like this sort of stuff I can still remember the Milky Bar tune, kid song from when I was about 4 or 5. So I think they've been very clever, traditional advertisers, over the years of portraying their products in a positive light, like, you'll feel great if you have this. And they're still at it, I think they're using social media to do that. But I think we've got we're starting to get a bit more of a level playing field now with social media and more independent websites, blogs, and media platforms to give people a different perspective. But yeah, definitely, do more research, I guess I would encourage people to do, particularly anything around animal products and animal consumption. Really do your research and find out what's really happening behind the scenes, not just what the advertiser is telling you.
There's another common sort of ploy that I think you and I both share is it's normally another one aimed at children, but that whole confectionery at the counter, and the whole thing of, hopefully this might help some people who are transitioning, but you came up with a little trick, Twix trick, I used to love a Twix as well back in the day, and or a Mars bar. And when you're going up to, for me, it's going to the post office. So often, you see the chocolate bars there, and, especially when you transition, it's sort of like, oh, they're trying to feed you that again. Can you tell us a little bit about, your trick you came up with to try and get rid of that sort of craving, that urge?
Yeah, definitely. So one of my favorite confectionery items was a British Twix, and apparently there is an American Twix and it's different. That's why I've said British Twix, but it's basically these two kind of stick things with caramel and chocolate, and they were lovely. And so obviously when I went vegan, I was like, oh bugger, I can't have a Twix. And I remember being at the petrol station, or the gas station for American viewers, and I went to pay, and of course there's all the sweets and everything. Of course there's a Twix, and I thought, oh, I really fancy a Twix. And what I did was, in my mind, I reminded myself, and I got an image in my mind of a cow forcibly impregnated, and her baby being stolen, and her mooing in grief, which is what cows do when their babies are stolen. And also I remembered that apparently in dairy there's a small amount of infected pus and blood that's allowed to go in. So I had this kind of image in my mind, and then all of a sudden I looked at that Twix, and then I saw what was in my mind, my urge, and I was like, don't want that, definitely don't want that. And that was it. So now whenever I see any kind of mainstream chocolate, like regular dairy chocolate or anything, I automatically just have that image of the cow in my mind, plus a little bit of the blood and pus thing, and I have absolutely no interest in it at all. So I found that to be really useful, because often what we're seeing, it's an emotional reaction. Like I saw the Twix and my immediate reaction was remembering, how it tastes and how nice it was. So then when I was able to replace that with the reality of how it was created, the association became very different, and it became easy to say no to it. Now, of course, if someone brings out, and I wish they would, a vegan version of a British Twix, I've been waiting 24 years for this, and that's at the counter, I'll happily buy it as a naughty treat. So but that's what worked for me, is kind of like, is just looking at something and just creating another association. So if you're a visual person, you might see something. If you're more of a kinesthetic person, perhaps you might feel like the cow would feel, being forcibly impregnated and having a baby stolen, or the sound. If you're more of an audio, auditory person, perhaps you might hear the cries of grief. So I think it's just a very simple and quick way of just reassociating with animal products.
Well, thank you so much for that. Hopefully that'll help some of the folks out there transition, or just even us, waiting on the vegan version. for us living in New Zealand, they keep on bringing in the supermarkets now all the British chocolates in the international aisle, and I'm like,
why now? Why didn't you do it before? I know, certainly. I mean, it's such a great way of looking at it, isn't it? And I mean, the wonderful Dr. Michael Clapper, he was the one that got me early on, because I was a big cheese fanatic, you know, and one of the first things that I watched, I think, was like Forks Over Knives or Cowspiracy or something, where he said that, you know, milk and cheese is baby calf growth fluid, you know, full of hormones.
Yeah.
And that from that moment on, I feel sick if I see, you know, a block of cheese or anything, because I just look at it, and from that moment on, it just became yellow hormone-filled goop. Oh, you know, it's
yeah.
So once you have that in your mind, but I think that's a brilliant, you know, that really, your trick really pulls the emotional, you know, side of it and the reality, and really affirms those beliefs. So yeah, fantastic. On your website, you state that your mission is vegan world domination, which is wonderful, where animals are no longer exploited, abused, commodified, or killed for human consumption. You became a journalist around the same time you went vegan, and you know, back in the 90s, things must have been incredibly different back then. How did you go about incorporating your beliefs into your writing?
Yeah, it was certainly very different. But you know, when people say that, and it's true, look, 24 years ago, it was difficult. But I also like to remind people that there are vegans who have been vegan, people who have been vegan for much longer than me. There's the wonderful British marathon runner, Fiona Oakes, who's been vegan for 45 years and is breaking world records and only has one kneecap. I also got the pleasure of meeting Arthur Ling, who is the founder of Plamel, which is the UK's oldest plant-based milk and chocolate company. And his son, Adrian, runs it now. But Arthur went vegan in 1927. You know, these are people that, you know, helped to coin the term, or, you know, worked with the people like Donald Watson, who helped to coin the term back in the 1940s. So I always kind of remind myself that even though I think I had it tough in the 90s, there were still all these amazing pioneers before that. But yeah, it was tricky. When I would go to Sainsbury's, for example, which is a big supermarket chain in the UK, the only choice of milks, plant-based milks, was soya milk sweetened with apple juice, or soya milk unsweetened, and that was it. So it was quite tricky. And then in terms of my journalism, I'd done a little bit of writing, but I kind of started to work formally as a journalist. I did some journalism training in the mid-90s, and then around 96, 97, I kind of started working full-time in journalism. In my first jobs, I worked for a social housing firm, a magazine, and a personnel HR magazine. Certainly in the HR magazine, I immediately got onto equal opportunities straight away. So I wrote one of the first pieces about trans people's rights in the workplace and LGBTIQ issues. So I couldn't really bring animal rights into those two magazines, but I started doing some writing for the vegan magazine. And then over the years, I've freelanced for various places. I worked for the gay press here in Australia, and they gave me a magazine to edit, a niche women's magazine. I had a whole page of activism. Of course, I'd have animal rights in every single issue. Sometimes, you know, if it was a gay person like Dan Matthews, who's the vice president of PETA, he had his autobiography out. So I've got a full page, you know, in the magazines there. So I've always tried to incorporate it. And then with freelance journalism, particularly opinion pieces, haven't written any those really for quite a while now, but I've had pieces in the Sydney Morning Herald, the ABC, News Limited, on animal rights activism, on speciesism. So I've just really kind of looked for ways to get my writing out there. I was a Forbes contributor for a year between 2017 and 18, and I wrote specifically about vegan and plant-based businesses and that sector. So I just really kind of look for those opportunities and you know, places that were willing to publish and pay. Then yeah, that's kind of how I've gone about that. And then of course now because nowadays we can all be the media, just like you're doing with this interview and this video. And I've got my podcast, Vegan Business Talk, where I interview vegan entrepreneurs. So I think it's a mix. I've tried to have a mix of getting published in other places, but also putting my own stuff out there as well.
Oh, well, thank you for taking those opportunities, because every single one counts at the end of the day. Like for us personally, we've experienced quite a bit of the bias, and you've talked about that in a lot of previous interviews, that the bias we see in the media. For us, we did a an interview for our cookbook with the local rock station, and they're big supporters of Meat Stock, New Zealand's meat festival, which is quite horrible. But basically, they threw me in there with the wolves because the producer didn't tell the presenters that a vegan was coming on board because they'd never had vegans on there. And basically, we had one person kind of open to it. The other guy was just a meathead, to put it politely. And so, yeah, we really witnessed that sort of bias because they were really trying to put veganism on the back foot there. On the other hand, though, we have had magazines done with North and South out here, big farming one, managed to get a vegan article in there. And that was brilliant, people we least expected it from. But can you tell us a little bit about the bias that you've witnessed in the industry and, what most of us will see?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I get what the scenario that you've explained. I've had that myself before. I think it was with the ABC here. They brought on a cattle farmer onto the call, which they didn't say they were going to. And I've also spoken at last year, I spoke at the Canberra Writers Festival, and there was 5 of us on a panel. I was the only vegan. So I think with that, I mean, look, there has been a lot of bias in the media over the years, particularly against veganism, but certainly in the past few years, I think probably since about 2014, there's also been a lot more really positive coverage. I've seen it happen in the US, the UK with Veganuary, of course. They've got the breakfast TV shows, Piers Morgan notwithstanding. They've had really good guests on to put forth the positive side of veganism. So yeah, I think since about 2014, we have seen a lot more positive media coverage, which is great. But still, there's going to be a bit of backlash. I think with the examples that you mentioned, particularly with mainstream media, is try and do as much research as you can beforehand and try and find out as much as you can about what the angle of the story is going to be, who else is going to be a guest on there, and about the show in general, and make an informed decision about whether it's worth your while going on there. I mean, my argument tends to be is that it can be tricky because with some like TV shows in particular, they can be quite unethical and they can actually edit your responses to make you sound like you're saying something you didn't really want to say, or because it's out of context. But on the other hand, if you don't go on there, they will probably do something really negative about veganism anyway. So at least you've got an opportunity to put your side across. But I guess, at the end of the day, just try and be expect it. So if that does come and they put you on the back foot, just remain calm, take a deep breath and remain calm, try not to kind of get kind of angry, because then you're fulfilling the stereotype of the angry vegan, and just stay calm and put your point of view across as best you can. But it can be frustrating, but we just got to take the rough with the smooth, really.
For sure, yeah. I mean, at least we're getting out there somehow, and the message is reaching somebody. So, that's really valuable. Thank you. One of the brilliant pieces of advice that we've learned from you is to be proactive with the media. We've heard you say about, if you read a negative story in the media, get in touch with that publication or that show and offer another to them from a positive angle, which I think is brilliant. But how hard is that to do? Can anybody do that? Or do you need to have a bit of media experience? Or, if there's someone out there who's like, God, that's a load of rubbish. That's not the case at all. I wish they'd do something else on this. Can anyone write in with a response and say, I'd like to talk about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd like to give a shout out to a friend of mine in LA called Karen Dawn, who runs something called dawnwatch.com. And this is actually a media and animal advocacy media service. And what Karen does is she'll send out some of the highlights of some of the stories that have happened in the media, particularly her focus is mainly mainstream media. And then she'll say, right, this is a summary of it. If you'd like to write to the editor or write to the journalist, what have you, here's how you do it. And she gives really nice guidelines. So instead of kind of, ranting at them, saying, like you say, replying and saying, look, this was a load of rubbish, you got it all wrong, because that will put, the journalists on the back foot, to say, I read your article, I was a little disappointed with X, Y, and Z, because actually, then you put what your viewpoint is. I would love it, would love to see, another article, addressing this or something like that. And sometimes that will be printed as a letter to the editor, whether that's in print paper or whether that's online. So that anyone can do that. I mean, certainly a lot of the people that do that, that are subscribers to Karen's Dawn Watch, are just regular people who that's their main form of advocacy. We talked about different types of advocacy, and that's their main one, is to respond to journalists, with a kind of a letter to the editor, or if it's a positive story as well, just say, oh, this is really great, I'm so glad that you covered this, because that can encourage journalists to continue on the subject. In terms of pitching a story, obviously, if they've got an opinion page, and you wanted to pitch something along those lines, have a look on the website's guidelines, because some of them will actually have guidelines and a particular email address to send to the opinion section to have it published. But yeah, there's nothing stopping anyone kind of getting in touch and saying, look, what about this as a different angle, for sure.
Well, thank you for that. That's some brilliant advice, and we'll get and link
Dawn Watch.
Yeah, Dawn Watch in the description of this video, so people can get there and find out about that. Now, you're someone who's worn many hats. You're an author, a speaker, a journalist. You've got your own podcast. That's just to name half a dozen of them. What was it that sparked that interest in you to try and help grow and encourage vegan businesses?
Yeah, so I'd been involved in journalism. That's been my career for nearly 20 years, but the media landscape has changed a lot. So I think about 6 years ago, I started hanging out with entrepreneurs, looking for, what else could I maybe do if I wasn't just going to stay and do traditional journalism as a freelance writer. And I started to become quite interested in entrepreneurialism. And I was going to, networking events, and I had people coming up saying, well, how do I write a press release? How do I send a pitch to a journalist? And in my head I was thinking, everyone knows that surely. And then I thought, well, no, actually, why should they know it? Of course I know it, because I've been a journalist for a long time. So I started kind of just helping people out, working with people, but I wasn't really feeling that passionate about it, because they were just regular business owners, accountants or what have you. Nothing wrong with accounts, but I'm just saying I didn't really necessarily feel any particular passion about it. But a friend of mine said to me, well, who would you ideally like to work with? And I said, vegan business owners, definitely. And so I had the idea, and I thought, well, there must be a book, there must be some books out there about how to start and grow a vegan business. So I looked, and there was nothing, not even the Americans had done anything. So I thought, that's the universe telling me maybe I should write it. So I had this idea to write a book, which eventually, a year later in 2015, became Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business, which is basically a how-to guide for anyone, whether they're making products, whether they're offering services, or whether they're running a business of any kind and they want to run it on vegan principles. And it covers things like, how to start up, branding, marketing, PR, systems, staff, etc. And then I interviewed over 60 vegan entrepreneurs and weaved their expertise through that, because I wanted to learn myself as well, which I did along the way, and I wanted to create something, a book, a how-to guide for aspiring vegan business owners, and also for those who are already running a business. There's a lot of really good stuff around marketing and PR. So I just wanted, to provide a tool to help more people run vegan businesses, because like you mentioned, my mission is vegan world domination. I want all businesses to be by default vegan. They don't have, so eventually the word vegan could become redundant, because it's so unnecessary, because it's like, why wouldn't a business be vegan? So that was how I kind of did a pivot, which I know is the buzzword of 2020, but I kind of did it a few years before that.
No, that was brilliant. It's Vegan Ventures it explains so much on your website, which of course we'll link to as well, but it's just full of such helpful information. It's fantastic. And in a previous interview, you've said before that it's so important to make it as easy as possible for people to go vegan. Was this the same when it came to helping to get vegan businesses off the ground, making it as easy as possible for those entrepreneurs?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, certainly all the ones that I spoke to, and as I interviewed over 60 vegan entrepreneurs from all different sectors from across the globe. And, a lot of them would say there are certain key things that people will often get wrong. Now, you can't, get everything right or expect to get everything right. Everyone's going to have a learning curve, but there are some key things that there are a lot of people said, oh, I wish I would have known that before I started the business. And so really it's kind of about, making it as easy as possible for people to avoid the key mistakes and to try and get as much right as they possibly can. And to not kind of, have to experience a lot of those pitfalls. So it was really about, and also a bit of inspiration as well, which is why I really wanted to include the insights of other entrepreneurs throughout it, so that people could see how, certain things like how certain challenges had come about and how a particular business owner had overcome those, so that people were really kind of equipped to, once they decided they wanted to start a business and run it on vegan principles, they would have some kind of base of how to go about things.
Well, one thing that I noticed, well, even we've done it in the past, is when you get that sort of, you just start and you get that brand name and you want to get it out there, you go and you make social media pages, because they seem to be a vital tool now in all businesses. And so you get your Facebook page, you get your Instagram page, you get your Twitter page, you get your YouTube page. And so many of us, like ourselves, you get overstretched, would you say it's probably better for people starting out to maybe just focus on one or two, as opposed to trying to get yourself everywhere before you're anywhere?
Yeah, what I think is a good idea is, once you've got your brand and you've got your brand name, get the channel itself. So register for it so that you've got the name. But you don't necessarily have to be active on all of them at once, because that can be really overwhelming, especially if you're trying to, set up your business as well. And particularly, in the beginning, often people are bootstrapping. So the owner is doing kind of, a lot of the stuff in the business itself. And then to have to be able, do social on top of that, it can be quite overwhelming. So my advice is to find out really where are your customers likely to be. So for example, if you're a food company or a fashion company or a business where your product is visual, then, obviously places like Instagram and Pinterest may well be the place where you want to kick off with. See, personally, I'm not a huge fan. I've never used Pinterest, and I'm not a huge fan of Instagram. I do use it, but I find it a bit of a pain. I'm also not a big fan of Twitter, but because I've been a journalist, I'm on it. But I'm mainly on where I focus a lot of my efforts are Facebook and LinkedIn, because that's where my clients are. That's where my potential clients and customers are. So I would, really kind of, so it might be, YouTube might be for, workout for somebody else, depending on the type of business that you're in. But don't feel that you have to be on every single platform. We've seen platforms like Snapchat and now TikTok, which is coming up, and it can be tempting to go, oh, well, I'd better be on that. But you've really got to think of it, particularly from a business perspective. Is that channel really going to be right for me? Are a lot of my customers, going to be on that? So I think you have to have a little bit of strategy behind it. And sometimes it can be good to get one or two up and running. And then you might think, oh, well, okay, I think it's probably a good idea for us to be on here as well. You'll see a lot of businesses. I've seen a lot of businesses, like particularly food businesses, they've only got a Facebook page and an Instagram. That's it. They don't bother with anything else. So it's going to depend on your brand. I think you need to know where your customers are, and also, make sure you're kind of quite comfortable and happy being on those platforms yourself, if possible. But, at the end of the day, really, if you're running a business and you're going to use social media for business, you've got to be where your customers are. Otherwise, you might as well just be on there for social, posting your happy snaps.
Definitely. No, that's great advice. Thank you. We certainly, I think taking on too much puts businesses under so much stress as well. We find ourselves, we've started up pages, and then you end up feeling like you're obligated to be tuning in all the time. Oh my God, I haven't put a post on this for a week, and I've been focusing on this one. It's better to do something, to do less and do it well, than to try and overstretch yourself and not do anything well. So that's really good to bear in mind. One of the other techniques that we've heard you utilize as well when using social media is the 80-20 rule of posting, which is fantastic. And I think it's, it's so valuable to keep in mind, both for business and for social activism. Could you explain that principle to our viewers?
I will, although I will give a little bit of an update. So the 80-20 rule, which became popular a few years ago on social media, is post 80% of kind of educational content or inspiring content, entertaining content, and only 20% promotional, i.e. buy my stuff content. Now, it's interesting because I've since seen that some people are saying, oh, that's a little bit outdated now, because it can be argued that almost anything you you post could kind of be classed as promotional. So I think it kind of depends on what you classify as a promotional post. So for example, you could have a really interesting, you might have an interview with somebody or a post about someone who's really interesting that's got nothing really to do with your business. But then at the very end, you might weave in a sentence or a line that says, oh, go to our website for such and such. So the main thrust of the post isn't a sales post. Like, it's not, here is our latest product, go buy it now, you know, which is a very obvious promotional post. But there are ways, I think, that people are starting to kind of weave things in. So for example, I've got the Vegan Women's Leadership Network that I'm doing. So I might put a post up about, you know, some really amazing vegan woman who's doing something really cool. And then at the end, that's what the thrust of the post is. It's inspirational and educational, what have you. But then at the end, I'll put, you know, and you can join the Vegan Women's Leadership Network here. And here's a link. So it's not overtly promotional, but there's still a little bit of promotion in it. So I guess there's a little caveat there. I still think that, broadly speaking, you know, that the 80-20 rule is probably still appropriate, but I think we've evolved a little bit and there are slightly different ways to do things. I think in the past, promotional posts were seen as literally, here is our thing, buy it. Whereas now, I think it's a little bit more subtle. So technically the ratio might be a little bit different now, but I still think, yeah, you know, you've got to see what works for your audience. You know, what do they like? What do they respond to? I mean, certainly you don't want to be doing every single social post, here's our thing, buy our stuff, because people will get bored. And I think people do want to see more now, you know, stories about the brand, about the people behind it. You know, they want to be entertained or inspired or educated. So I do think you definitely need a balance, but don't be afraid to sell. I think that's important. I mean, I know there's an argument that people don't necessarily tend to make a lot of sales on social media. It's more about building your audience. There's some truth in that, but I also think you can make sales from social media. Certainly on LinkedIn, you know, that happens with me quite a lot. So don't be afraid to tell people who you are and what you do, because ultimately, you know, you want to stay in business, but you've just got to kind of find out what people want and what they're responding to and mix it up a bit. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that. Yeah. I'd like to add on to that. For us, we use it in our just personal stuff as well. And just on your home Facebook page, you know, if you do 20% of happy, positive things about vegan, or 80% of things happy, positive about vegan, and then have that 20% of, you know, whether that's the graphic post or the, you know, real informative. For me, I find that's great for not getting rid of all my old friends. And then at the same time, when I scroll through my feed, I'm not like, wow, I'm a depressing git, aren't I?
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I did that. I think in the past, you know, I was posting a lot of like really like full on stuff. And I think some people started to unfollow. And I've actually unfollowed some people who literally just post the most awful graphic stuff and very angry rants. I've had to hide that because I don't want to see that all the time in my views, you know, as I'm scrolling through the feed. So I think you're right. Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you put the majority, if people come to expect the majority of your stuff's going to be, you know, positive, interesting, entertaining, then every now and then you slip in something more graphic. It's more effective because, you know, you're kind of shocking them out of it. And then you go back to your nice positive, and then a little bit further down, wham, and suddenly it's like, whoa. So yeah, I think it can be quite effective doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. I always like to think of it as a guerrilla veganism, you know, striking from the distance. But for some of our viewers out there, though, they may not be interested in having their own business. You know, they're happy doing what they're doing already. So maybe some advice for them that you might be able to shed some light on is how they can best support these vegan businesses.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's several ways. I mean, one, obviously, if you want to buy, if you need or want to buy something, go with the vegan business first if you can. If you can't afford to buy from, you know, any particular vegan businesses, one really good way is there's two ways. One is to share their business on social media. So just go, oh, hey, I really love this business. You know, they do really good stuff. So, you know, maybe share one or two of their posts now and then. But also, for example, if you've got a birthday or a special occasion coming up and, you know, you've got family or friends that say, oh, what would you like for your birthday or for this occasion? You could say, oh, could you get me a gift certificate for this business? So I think those are kind of, really good ways. Obviously, buy from them if and when you can, if it's appropriate. If not, just share about them on social media. And that's why I think it comes back to businesses sharing shareable content on social media that isn't just buy our stuff, because if you've done a nice interesting video, even if it's like a behind the scenes video of how we make our vegan chocolate, that's something that people can share on their social and say, oh look, this is how they make this vegan chocolate, isn't that interesting, kind of thing. Do you see what I mean? So I think those are really good ways that you can support vegan businesses.
Yeah, no, it's great. Good positive stuff. And, the vegan marketplace is unique, and not just when it comes to our ethics either. I mean, one such really lovely example that we discovered when New Zealand was in lockdown, and, it was really hard to see some of our small vegan business friends, they were particularly eateries, they were really struggling and worried that they were going to go out of business. And what happened was, they all began pulling together and supporting one another and saying to their customers, look, it's wonderful that you're supporting us, but please support these ones as well. Go and get something from them. They were sort of doing food that you could pick up at the door outside, kind of thing. Please order from these guys as well. Please share the love, and which was just brilliant. And now they made it through, which is just fantastic. It was so great to see, and hopefully it shouldn't be a one-off. So what's the importance of vegan companies in helping to support and promote one another?
Yeah, I think it's really important. One of the people I interviewed for my book was Seth Tibbott from Tofurky. And one of the things he said, when I think I asked him about, well, there's all these other companies coming up now and again, how are you standing out? And one of the things he says, that a rising tide lifts all boats. So what he meant by that is that it makes the category stronger. When more players come into the category, it actually makes the category stronger, whether it's plant-based meats, plant-based cheese, etc. So I think rather than seeing your so-called competition as competition, you see them as collaborators. Certainly I've seen here in Australia and also in the US, companies that have done something similar where they've come together, particularly if they've got complementary products. They've actually offered special deals. They've collaborated so that when you can go and pick up one of this company's products, but then you can also pick up this other company's products, and order it as like a pack, for example. So certainly seeing quite a lot of those collaborations, which I think come quite naturally to vegan businesses because we're on a broader mission. Yes, of course, when you're running a business, you've got to make a profit for it to be successful, but we're on that kind of higher mission. So I think it is really important. For example, there was 3 companies that were like vegan shoe companies and accessories, and they were all technically what you would class as in competition, and they did this thing where they chipped in to buy a stall at an event, and then they took turns in staffing the stall, but they were promoting they had all of their products on there, and that was really good because it kept the cost of the stall down, which was great because they could all just put in, I think there was 3 of them, so they each paid a third, and then they took turns to be there answering customers' questions, and that worked really well. It was such a win-win-win for everyone. So I think it's very important, collaboration.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
Such a cool idea.
Hopefully some of the business owners out there will be thinking about who they can be working with now. We've been vegan almost coming up 4 years now, and we've just seen an absolute explosion in vegan products. Although when we started out, we're in an area where tofu was sort of exotic, the Southland of New Zealand. But there's so many different vegan entrepreneurs rising at the moment, so many different enterprises. Are there any sort of tips for some of these folks, to come out in these emerging markets and be a bit more unique to stand out against the competition? Or not competition.
Yeah. It is important because, like we said, you're no longer the only vegan cheese in town, or you're no longer the only vegan chocolate or vegan meat in town. So you have got to kind of start to stand out a bit. But if you think about it, if you look at something like cheese, the dairy aisles are just full of all these different, types of cheese, and obviously we want the vegan version of that. So I think just try and be as innovative as possible. experiment. If it's food, experiment with tastes. If it's fashion, experiment with looks. I will just put a personal call out now. There needs to be way more vegan glitter and sparkle in fashion. It's sorely lacking. It's my, a sticking point for me. I've been saying this for a long time. But yeah, try and be as innovative as possible. I think in terms of food, we're certainly starting to see more niching down. So we're seeing vegan Italian, vegan Mexican, vegan Indian. And I think we'll see more of that. You've just got to kind of have that point of difference, share about who you are. Don't be afraid as a founder to let people know who you are on your about page. I know on a lot of vegan business owners' websites, the about page, there's nothing about like, well, who's behind it. People want to know that nowadays. You can't hide behind your brand any longer. Just see what's out there and then see how can I contribute to this market or to this sector, to this category, and have some kind of point of difference. It could be your packaging, it could be your messaging, or it could be a taste or a flavor or a texture, all of those things. But yeah, it is important to figure out what your point of difference is going to be.
It's so interesting. It's such an exciting time to be vegan. We're just growing so fast. It's fantastic. And, we've been touching here on some business tips, which is, I've already learned so much from those already. But however, the real wealth of information lies in the books that you've written and the courses you provide. I mean, your website alone, veganbusinessmedia.com, we'll make sure that we link to that, contains some fantastic resources. There's so much in there. What are some of the goodies that people can find and learn about on your website?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there's plenty of blog posts with anything from, I've got actually one of the most popular posts is how to find an investor for your vegan business. So what I've done is I've got a list of vegan and vegan friendly investors and how to contact them and how to pitch them on the website. There's articles about a few media and PR tips. There's a few trends articles. Some of those are republished from when I wrote for Forbes. There's speaker tips. So if you're wanting to become a public speaker, how to get testimonials for your vegan business. So there's quite a lot of that on there. There's video interviews that I've done with people, vegan business leaders. There's a link to the podcast there. The podcast is also available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and all those other places where you can get podcasts. So that's all available for free. The book obviously is available on Amazon as a paperback, or the ebook you can buy it anywhere, including from my site. And then I've got Vegans in the Limelight, which is my 12-month online PR course and group coaching program where I teach people, teach vegan entrepreneurs, authors, creatives, coaches, etc., how to get media coverage. And that's very enjoyable to do. I've got a particular business in Canada, actually, who are originally from the UK, but they're in Canada in a ski resort, and they've just embraced the techniques in the course. They've been featured in Forbes, in their local media, and are just getting a lot of publicity. So I do that, and I do one-on-one consults, coaching, and and then there's the Vegan Women's Leadership Network that I'm launching in the next week or two. So yeah, lots of stuff out there available depending on where you're at in your particular journey. But there's certainly a lot of free resources at veganbusinessmedia.com, as well as the book, which is just $20 or something. Yeah.
No, it's awesome. And, so well worth it. Is masses of information in there. And, thank you so much for everything that you do to get all this information up and out there. You've been talking about the Vegan Women's Leadership Network. So this is a global ethical movement. No, it's not. Veganism is a global ethical movement. The Vegan Women's Leadership Network is a global ethical leadership membership community for vegan women. And this sounds right up my alley. This is sounds so excited, and I can't wait to learn more about it myself. But what does it entail, and who can benefit from this awesome latest initiative?
Yeah, thank you. It's quite new. So I actually did a pre-launch at the beginning of March. So this was kind of right in the midst, just when the COVID-19 panic hit. And I kind of thought, is this going to be the right time to pre-launch something like this? But I put it out there with a special founding members offer for a 1-year membership, just to generate interest. And this is actually a useful tip for anyone wanting to start a vegan business, because it's do your market research, find out, is there a market for your product? So before I kind of, built anything or, did anything with it. I just kind of put it out there. I created a landing page, a sales page, put it out there and said, look, this is what I'm thinking. If there's enough interest by the end of April, if I've got enough women to have joined at this special offer by the end of April, then we'll go ahead with it. So by the end of April, it came about, yes, proof of concept. So I've just been busy beavering away behind the scenes with the front-facing website, the membership portal. We've got our first virtual meetups just for founding members at the end of this week. And then once it launches, there'll be regular virtual meetups, and there'll be online live webinar trainings and different areas of leadership, personal development, professional development, basically again providing tools for vegan women regardless of their professional background. We've got 160 women at the moment at the time of this interview from literally across the globe, which is really exciting. And some are working quite high up in the corporate world. Others are working at NGOs. Others are entrepreneurs and business owners. So it's a real mix. And it's really just to, provide networking and connection, as well as resources and training for vegan women to help them become leaders, whatever that looks like for them in whatever field that they're in. So we are at the very beginning at the moment. So obviously we're going to be, building those resources as we go. But I'm excited to get that off the ground.
Oh, I'm excited to check it out as well. I'm being part of it. I feel like I'm hogging all the questions here, love. Sorry. No, I really wanted to check that out, and definitely interested in being a part of that. I have to ask, what is it? Because this is not the only person that has said the same to us. But what is it about vegan women? Why are there so many of us active in the movement? Here in New Zealand, for example, there are some fantastic advocates who are men and activists as well. But, the really strong characters, the real driving forces are almost all women. Why is that, do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I know it's like with the animal rights movement. I think in general, there are, I think that the statistics from what anecdotal studies may have been done is that there's a higher percentage of women, involved in this. But it's been great to see men embracing this. And, particularly now with social media, some of the guys are coming out and dispelling a lot of those myths. And of course, the movie Game Changers did that as well. So I don't know. I mean, I don't like to stereotype in terms of gender, because I know there's an argument, women are more caring or what have you. I don't know whether it's that. I think it's not necessarily nature, it's the whole nature versus nurture, but I don't know. I guess that women just, they have I'm not going to even say that, women tend to be more compassionate, but maybe we're a little bit more or we've been taught to be a little bit more in tune with our compassion and with our emotions than men have traditionally been, because men are told to, be very stalwart and, meat is masculine. There's all these kind of stereotypes that I think have come about, but I think we're starting to see that disappear now, or to be more of a balance. But certainly, look, there's some amazing vegan women leaders, and I think they're not always front and center. I think a lot of women, particularly in animal rights and probably all social justice movements actually, and in veganism, a lot of them are doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And I'm sure, of course, there are men and non-binary people, etc., doing all of that behind the scenes. But I think that it's time for more vegan women, I think, to come out of the shadows and find their voices. And so that's what I'm hoping for the network, to really help women, vegan women leaders, to do that.
Well, thank you so much for making the network, and even for me as a bloke, I'm excited to see what comes of it, and I'm sure if Jackie gets involved, hopefully I'll be learning from it too.
Excellent. Wonderful.
Is there any other projects that you've got on the burner at the moment that you want us to talk about?
No, just a couple of partnerships I'll be announcing that are in line with the Leadership Network. We're partnering with a major UK event, which are bringing their events online for this year because of the whole pandemic situation. So no, really, I'm just kind of focusing on doing what I'm doing, helping vegan business owners and entrepreneurs to raise their profile, getting the network off the ground, and collaboration. I mean, that's been at the beginning of 2020. I said one of my key words for 2020 is collaboration. And I mean, who knew? None of us knew how 2020 was going to turn out. Here in Australia, we had the bushfires, then we had the COVID-19, and then obviously, in the US, etc. We've had all the issues around racial injustice come to the fore, which is fantastic. But it's certainly been an unexpected 2020. But the word collaboration is just, I think, so key. So I'm just really looking to do more of that, instead of a lot of, because obviously on social media it can be very divisive. People have got their opinions, and we've seen people unfriending each other left, right and centre because they, even vegan, amongst vegans, I found it really sad. People are unfriending each other because they disagree over certain things. And it's like, wow, now more than ever, we've got a chance to really try and transform our societies, moving away from animal agriculture and animal exploitation, that we need to just try and be the best version of ourselves that we can. And so, that's kind of my aim. And I think that's only going to happen when we collaborate with each other. We can all do our own thing, which is awesome, but we've also, I think, got to really collaborate and help to lift each other up, because at the end of the day, our mission is the same. It's, a kinder world, and kinder and equitable world for all beings, people, animals and planet.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, very well said. And we really look forward to seeing all of the projects that you've got going at the moment. And I'm not quite sure when you sleep, or if your mind ever stops with everything that you've going on, but, of all your amazing accomplishments, and there are so many, is there any one in particular that you're most proud of?
Oh gosh, it's a difficult one because it changes, as we get older and do different things. I do remember being quite proud of I wrote an article for the ABC here, which is the national broadcaster, for their website, and it was about speciesism. This was back in 2014, and I was really pleased to have got an article about speciesism in a mainstream on a very mainstream website, and I won a Voiceless Media Award for that. So that was really nice. And I think probably one of the other things, it's not necessarily relating to, again, to animal stuff, but I wrote an article for the Sydney Morning Herald about a friend of mine who identifies as non-binary, and I used the pronouns ze and zir instead of he, her, and I said, can you please not change this? And they didn't, and I thought that was quite cool for a mainstream newspaper to use kind of words that they've never used before. But really, really for me, I'd say that the most happy I am is when people either come up to me or they send me a message saying, I've been following you for a little while, I'm now vegan. That to me is priceless. It's just brilliant. I'm just so happy about that. So, I think if I'm part of the greater soup or consciousness that, is helping more and more people to become vegan, to be kinder to each other and to other animals, that makes me very happy.
It's awesome. You've gone on to create many of your own sandwich moments in other people.
Hopefully.
No, we've touched on the names throughout this episode, but can we just recap for our followers where we can keep up with you, keep up to date with all your projects, and where we can find out more of your brilliant knowledge?
Oh, thank you. The main website would be veganbusinessmedia.com. And there's a link there to the Vegan Women's Leadership Network and to all the other stuff that I do. And then on social media, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as Katrina Fox, or Katrina Fox Vegan, I think I am on Instagram. But veganbusinessmedia.com has got links to all of those. So that's probably the main place.
Thank you so much for that. We'll make sure we link them as well so people can find it even easier. But we cannot thank you enough for all your brilliant advice through this. And I feel like I should have been writing notes as I was going through it.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome. And, one of the great things that we've discovered through, this whole pandemic and lockdown and, finding new things to do, I've discovered podcasts in a big way. And so, that's something else that our viewers can definitely learn from you, as well as your wonderful podcast. And there's all links to that on the site too. So
thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me. I'm so glad you reached out, and I love what you're doing. You've got a really good audience, a large audience, and I love that you're taking the initiative and doing things like this, and I appreciate you having me on your show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. To support our speaker, follow the links provided in the description. You can keep up to date with the series by subscribing to our YouTube channel at VeganFTA, and also following our Facebook page, Instagram or Pinterest. If you've enjoyed this series and you want to support it, you can also consider joining our Patreon. Every little helps, and your love and support goes a long way. Thanks for watching.